Hey, everybody, it's Thursday.
And it feels like it's been the longest week ever. I don't know why. But welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And we are so glad it is Thursday. Honestly, we have had fishing on the brain, I think, all week. And it is almost back to the weekend. So where do we start? I mean, with our fishing report, but where do we start with that?
Well, I mean, we have been trying to get back to our video fishing report at the end of the weekend, but last weekend it was difficult because we hit 3 different lakes in an area that we don't really fish.
It doesn't make it difficult. We just forgot to do it.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it does make it difficult because you have 3 bodies of water. They're all different. They were all like fairly close, but pretty separate, and they all had different characteristics with it. So there wasn't one, type of stuff. We went to one body of water. We were catching some really nice crappies on red, white, and blue twister tails, and then we went to another body of water and we couldn't even buy a bite with anything but brown. So I mean, that makes it makes it really difficult to give a good fishing report. But what I will say is that the water temperature has really started to stratify. We're seeing most of the lakes hitting that 70-degree mark and kind of topping out for us. So we got some warm weather coming up this weekend, so that might go up a little bit, but otherwise, I think the weeds are up, the fish are hungry, and it was a good weekend.
And that's actually an interesting point. I've seen a few people on Facebook be like, oh man, it's summer, like I'm out until fall. But I really urge people, there's so many people out on the water already for different recreation sports. Bring your rods, bring some baits, bring all of your different things. Because while you're on the water, stop and catch some fish, because this is really a great time of the year to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I guess, really interesting. There are some places that are getting a ton of rain. So if that is you, let us know what your fishing is like, or if you're even able to get out fishing. I know people have had some crazy weather patterns go through. I think for the most part, we have been able to get out, and that's really good. And like you said, even explore new water. One of the things that prompted that, I'll even just be honest, I'll throw this out there, because the holiday weekend, one of the things that we did is we looked at the boat ramps in our area, and we kind of sorted it by what was no motor lakes. And so I know, or at least no wake lakes. And so I think a lot of times people are looking to get out of the water and to be recreating and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But if you are looking to stay in kind of some calm waters, that's something that's available to you as well. And so that was a fun thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was really cool to be able to hit a couple bodies of water that don't even have docks. You just dump your boat off and then you have to hop in from the water. So that's always a fun time. Yeah, and it was just fun, just exploring some new stuff.
Absolutely. So if you have a fishing report, let us know what that is. Otherwise, we are looking to get back out on the water and sharing some of our pictures and all of that, because it has been a great time out there. So I know we have a lot more to talk about with our guest. And so I think we're going to bring him in here in a minute. If you guys have questions or comments or things along the way, just pop that in the comment section and we will chat about all of those things that you guys are thinking about as well. Otherwise, let's bring our guest in. Brian, thank you so much for being here this evening.
How are you guys doing tonight? I went out in the woods and I came back with some a rack on my head. I seen these and I've got mosquitoes biting me, and I just thought,
yeah,
these are awesome. Man, I'm so glad I got that to itch my back, because the mosquitoes would sound like chainsaws in my neck of the woods.
It's actually a little bit funny that you brought up bugs, because I've been thinking about you lately, because I think one of the last times that we did talk to you must have been summer or fall, maybe, I guess, I don't know. But I remember that you and Heather had been out fishing at that point, and one of the things that you did is you took duct tape and put it backwards around your hat because the flies had been so bad that year. And this, for me, is that year. The flies have been so bad. I feel like I'm about to be eaten alive. My ankles look eaten up. And I've been almost thinking about trying your hat tape trick.
Well, it really works well, and you get some duct tape and you fold it over, or get some glue traps, about the best for the fly glue traps. We cut it and then roll it into a circle and then put it on the back of the hat. And if you put it on the back, you're going to get them. And she's out doing her thing, and she's got a fly collection there, and like deer flies, horse flies, everything is on her hat, even mosquitoes. And I don't know where that photo is, but I took a picture of it, and it is a bug collection for sure. And it's that time of year. So the sticker on the hat, you could take one. They make fly glue traps. They're pretty cheap. You take one sheet, and you can put it on 5, 6 hats, and you get the satisfaction of knowing that that bug did not bite you when it had its chance. So it's kind of cool.
Oh my gosh. Well, and based on this year, there's plenty of other flies that we're not going to catch. So maybe I'll try my best in the process. That's funny.
Yeah, well, mosquitoes are the ones. I just can't believe how fast that they start drilling, and and they got videos and stuff to show what they do. They're not melting through. They have like a machete or something, a micro machete, and sometimes it feels like it is a dull one. The way they cut through it. They have a purpose, right?
They
I don't
feed
know.
other things.
Maybe they don't. I don't know. I know.
Well, so have the bugs affected your fishing then?
The mayflies really shut her down around here. Winnie, Cass, Leech Lake went through it. We're coming out of it. Some of the guides that are out there beating the water every day, like myself, and there's a lot of them go on vacation this time of year because I don't see them driving by or I don't see them around. But there's some that are still sticking with it, and every day's different. You can't guarantee a lot of fish or a limit of fish. We've been getting them, but it's been really interesting. But now we're coming around it, and it's going to start picking up. It's neat too because you didn't see. We're in the perch triangle up here. We didn't see any jumbo perch for the longest time. It's like, oh man, this is terrible. And now they're starting to show up, and we can see why. They're distended. They ate so much, their bellies just go out like this, and even like a small perch, it almost looks like a sunfish. It just like a sunfish full of eggs. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be a fantastic bite. And I'm waiting for these fish to start chasing minnows and crayfish. They're just starting, and that's when we get that super aggressive puppet minnow plastics bite. And then as a guide, hey, could I get a minnow? Oh, you don't need one. It's already on your hook, the plastic. You're all set. And they can start pitching it. And one of the things I've been using here lately, because they're so fussy, the fish are fussy. You could see them on forward view and coming up, look, and they leave, coming up. And if they leave a second time, 3 of them go away with it. But I've been using smaller baits like this eye candy jig and leech. And these are tiny. I think they're almost a panfish bait. And I've been using them for panfish. But what I like about them is you could really scent them up and throw them out there. But in about a week, I'm going to be tying these big hunks on there. The big old eye candy minnows. And I'm super happy with the jig and leech, but I can't wait till I can go with more of something like that. And that's what they're going to be. They're going to be targeting these bigger paddle tails. Every year it gets like that, and they just hammer them. And the nice thing about this, because I've tried all different plastics, they never bite that tail off. I mean, they never.
Oh wow!
They never bite that tail off, and that's what I love about it. But right now, I'm using a little bit smaller stuff, and then, you were talking about that twister tail. I've been doing the same thing, just in a different, in more of a Northland thing here. There's the grub, and that thing's it's just a little grub. It's probably really reflective in there, but if I pull one out, you'll be able to see. But I got people getting a boat, they want to start ripping stuff, and I'm like, hey, that was so the last 3 years, but not this year. You're not going to rip stuff unless you want to clean all the fish out of the area. But this right here, slow rolled across the bottom. I've been using black, but now, Ned rigs work for a reason, and this is just a more detailed version of that, and it's got little curls, but you don't rip it. You just really move that rod really slow, like you're crappie fishing for fussy crappies. and you won't even feel it. Your lure disappears, and you're able to catch up with them. And so that's the kind of bite it's been turning into. But I still have lots of leeches. I get good jig and minnows. I love minnows, but if you would have asked me 5 years ago if we were going to have plastics like we do now, I wouldn't have believed it because I've always used plastics, but you're using them more than ever. And I still bring bait. Some people, if you get someone I got people that are like almost 90 in my boat, and they've always used a minnow. They want to try it, so I have that for them. I have leeches and stuff, but uh, I'll never deter anybody from trying something because that's how you find out. If you have 2 or 3 people with you, I automatically have 3 or 4 lines, and mine's the experimental one. I don't put on what works. I try stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And every day is kind of fun in that regard. Like you two went exploring on those little lakes. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's my favorite.
Well, and exactly what you're saying, actually, exactly what you're saying is, we have found that the leech bite so far this year has been it. And it's funny that you even picked out brown because that's straight up exactly what I've been using. And then that transition, because the fish do, when that water temperature warms up, I don't know if the leeches go away. I don't know what happens, but they switch to that. They switch to eating those minnows, just exactly like you're saying. And I mean, this is all just, I disconnected back somewhere, but honestly, now I'm watching you eat.
No, I mean I think that's an important thing that people don't pick up on a lot of times is that we call it's called the dog days of summer, right? You get really hot, the water's a lot of times flat, and people have a hard time catching fish, and I think there's 2 things going on there. One is people don't change their depth. They're still fishing a little too shallow, and they might need to scoot off to the deeper weeds or even off the weed edge a little bit. And 2, you need to switch up to a little bit bigger bait, even some of those paddle tails. Because I'll tell you what, when you're pulling, when you're able to retrieve some of those, like for us, a big bait is like 3 inches or 4 inches.
Sure.
And 3-inch bait, you catch tons of crappies, even down to 9 inches. They'll smoke that, and we catch bluegills on 2.5-inch baits sometimes. And
that's the crazy thing. And I think people don't have confidence in big baits.
Mm-hmm.
Say, well, I don't, the lake ain't full of big panfish, but if they're there, they're going to eat it, So, oh yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. Crawlers are good. But the thing is, they make a mess in the boat. So I try not to use them. But if I pull this out, you look at that, and that's not that big of a bait. That's going to be a good panfish bait. But I had the little eye candy minnow, which doesn't have the paddle there, just a flat minnow. I don't have it right here. I could probably dig it out here later. But, and I was throwing that this spring, and it's 3.5. And the bluegills had the whole thing in their mouth. But you have to really go light, 1/8 ounce, even 1/16, and just really move it light. And then a short shank jig. You don't need a long shank jig. You lose some of your action, and it's pretty fun, and you get the biggest ones right away.
Yeah.
That's actually a really great point with the short shank jig, because I think a lot of times with those bluegills, they will eat things like twist tails or, some of those bigger baits. But sometimes I like to pinch the head off if it's a big bait. I don't know, it just helps them get it in that mouth. So if you have that short shank, you're going to still match that bait, that right size profile with that jig head. That's a really great tip. That's cool. I'm going to do that.
Absolutely. I use a lot of long shanks because when I'm crappie fishing, it's just like walleyes. I double hook small fatheads and crappie minnows the same way I do the other minnows. So it's like a jig worm, because if I can catch 3 fish, 6 fish on one minnow, I'm fine. I just want to keep casting. I don't want to keep baiting hooks, but so I hook it on, and that's a little tiny, that's a 1/16 ounce right there, and double hook a minnow, throw it out there, and you'll find they don't care. Well, it has to be lively sometimes, but a lot of times you just got to move that thing, and you can't get the movement out of a minnow like you can with this stuff. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And I think with this TPE stuff, Northwoods really got a big advantage over everything because, for one thing, it floats. So when you hit the bottom with a stand-up jig, this thing floats. The tail goes up in the air. And then because it's like that, you could squeeze it into some scent. That scent never comes out of there. And but I know that if people haven't gone, but you can't beat a plain hook too with a chunk of meat. And if you look at these are designed for salmon. I seen them. First thing I said, that's gonna be great for walleye. Uh,
Mm.
but they're really really fine wire.
Okay.
So if it gets really tough, we have to do what we can. So I'll use a little split shot, and we'll just pitch just a chunk of worm or a small leech into the school of walleyes and bring it back real slow. You have to do what you got to do when you're guiding.
That is true. That is absolutely true.
You're
Sometimes,
sitting here digesting it. I think
well,
you're like, oh, I never even thought of that. But it's funny that you brought up that plain jig or that plain hook, because I was actually right at the end of our fishing on Sunday. I pulled out something similar, and I don't know how, if anybody really knows what a free rig is. So if you're familiar with like a Carolina rig or a Texas rig, basically the weight's up against the bait. A free
Yeah.
rig, the weight is above your stopper. So you can adjust where your weight stops before and then give your bait a lead. And I was throwing that for bluegills that we found kind of roaming around in a basin. And it just having just a hook, no weight on the plastic even helps a lot, because it gives it a lot more movement in the water, and they can come and suck it up. They don't even know that the hook's in it. So that's a great tip for walleyes and for panfish.
Bright colors like this in a bead, that real bright chartreuse. I like a little something I could see just shoot to the side. And so they make these bobber stoppers out there that are just rubber and they're super bright color. I use the bobber stoppers all the time by my hook so I can see it, because last year we're 27 feet of clarity on the lakes I'm guiding on. Super, super tough. So we're ripping stuff. And now it's really just kind of looks like a swamp thing out there. If your jig touches the bottom, it's a swamp thing when you lift it up. So you got to keep everything elevated. But there's a lot of algae this year.
yeah.
And so you got to go light, and you got to check your line all the time. So people like to troll. Not very good to go on the lakes I'm at right now. Maybe at night, but you're just going to have a bunch of green slimy spider webs hanging off your stuff if you don't check it nonstop. That's why pitching's kind of nice, but it's still not hot. Bluegills, crappies are fantastic. Pike are biting really good, and largemouth bass are on fire. Muskies, smallmouth, everything. The walleyes are fussy. Everywhere you go, the lake explodes with bait. There's surface dwelling minnows everywhere, and that could be anything from tullabies to just even some lakes have fatheads, golden shiners, Cisco, and how many different types of shiners in the lake. The lake explodes on the surface. And then underneath, you see a never ending school of all those perch. So the last 3 years, we had huge perch hatches that were super successful. Well, last year's perch are kind of big, and I think they're eating some of the stuff that the walleyes eat. Eventually, that should help us. I mean, there's so much fish out there, and because you're in your degree that you deal with summer kills sometimes. Well, we haven't had one for like 8-10 years. Very little. And we used to get them all the time. And the tullabies would die, Sescos or tullabies, whatever you want to call them, from wherever you're at. Whitefish, suckers. They're not dying. So you look down in the shallow water where it's clear, and there's 100, 200 suckers and one walleye in the middle. You don't want to be that person that's fishing something that's too good to be true and you're never getting a bite. You might be fishing suckers. There's a little tip for everybody out there, because I don't exactly tell my competition when they're sitting on a school of suckers for 3 days. I just like to see where they're at.
But that's why you pack with your AquaView.
Yeah, I do. I always have one around because, hey, you get to know. And after seeing them and looking on side imaging, is so detailed now. It's just silly. You see the minnows, you see everything, but you can tell the difference now. On side imaging, suckers kind of float forward, where walleyes will just sit like fighter jet formation. So when you're looking at side imaging, they look like wormwood. If you cut a piece of wormwood, you'll see little curls, little paisleys. suckers look like a big dark paisley going through, and walleyes, they're definitely just look like fighter jets just sitting there like you captured an image of them. And then on forward viewing, the suckers look like, wow. Oh, they're suckers. I gotta stop looking at it. If it looks too good to be true, it absolutely is. Unless it's a single fish or something like that. And then in the basin, gotta remember, just because you can see if you got all the technology, some of that stuff is tulibies, ciscos, whitefish, and but if they look small, they're probably nice walleyes. It depending on how you got your screen set up. And a little tip for everybody: don't be fishing suckers.
That's actually true. I think so often people do get caught up in just like, oh, my screen says fish,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really interesting point is, to target those fish, but use the clues that are there. So we were talking just before this about, the fish that are blowing up at the top of the water right now, because you were saying that the minnows are right along that surface. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we found recently, I'm sure it was just the lake that we were on, but we started casting at these blow up spots because I thought that it was like bass and stuff. And lo and behold, where we were, it was bluegills that were after,
Oh,
and a crappie or two mixed in. I guess I wasn't as surprised by that. Maybe I should be, but the bluegills there were chasing all of those little minnows. And it was so cool because you look over across the water and you're like, oh, that's the bass. But like, don't discount those. And like you're saying,
oh.
that could be big perch or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's a really cool thing to find.
Well, and I've seen that out there, and this is that time of year where bluegills actually get a lot of their protein from fry. And some of these fry are super tiny. I mean, they'd be hard to grab with your hand. They would just go through as you're lifting the water, but they're so small. They're too small to even use as bait. And some of these little tiny hooks I got, maybe, but these are this year's fry of all different types of minnows. So for a bluegill, it's a soft little living organism, and they've been eating bugs all summer, and they're just like, okay, now
Done
it's
with
time
that.
for me to torture these minnows. And it's their way of getting even with the perch, I think, for eating them later,
Mhm.
because bluegills really they turn the tides from spawn to middle summer. That's right. This time of year we catch a lot of bluegills. Use it if you're pulling crankbaits or if you're throwing puppet minnows and ripping them back. You catch big bluegills because they got that chase mentality. Then that's what I'm excited for. For guiding is when I get the walleyes chasing,
Mhm.
and so the crayfish they molt. They kind of basically, as a scuba diver told me, it looked like there's a crayfish down there. All of a sudden, there's two because it walked out of its shell, and the shell just sits behind like trash. And then they're soft, and every fish out there can almost eat them through a straw. So I think that's kind of cool. And they just start pounding, but they're chasing them, and I think that's when that rip and bite just gets fantastic. And then you can throw all kinds of paddle tails and jig worms, critters, and drop shots right now are going to be key. They're really fussy, and you'll get some on drop shots, and some people are using bobbers, but we'll outfish them pitching. Uh, but when the drop shot bite turns on, nobody will catch fish around you. You get them all in the drop shot. That's why I come up with that little stealth rig with a finger. Such a simple thing, but walleyes on a drop shot will leave you a pair of leech lips almost every other time. And leeches are expensive. And sometimes they get hooked. You don't have to do anything, but I like putting a bead on there. I like trying colored hooks or float. And that's why I like a finger line. It's such a simple thing. And that's why we call it the stealth rig because we never wanted to talk about it in years past. But hey, you got to talk, right? Cough it up, man.
Once in a while, right?
Once in a while, yeah.
Once in a while, I guess, once in a while. So what I'm hearing from you though is that this is the season where when people talk about match the hatch, this is kind of where that's important because early in the show, or you said, earlier in the season they're eating the bugs. And then earlier in the show, we talked about, there's that point in the season where they eat leeches. This is kind of like a mini progression, but that minnow bite is coming. And so you were talking about that. And so one of my favorite things to do is when we're launching the boat is like look around that launch bunch and see what those minnows look like. Because like you're saying, sometimes they're out in that middle and those fish are chasing them, but sometimes they're hidden in those shallows. And if you can see what those minnows look like, are they more brown? Are they more gray? Does the color not matter because they're so tiny, you know, and note that size? That's the kind of thing that's going to help you choose your bait to do that whole match the hatch kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing is sometimes you'll find a hot color that doesn't kind of look like a living thing in the water, but purple and like a mix like this is fantastic. And this is something that worked really good late last summer. So I'm keeping my eyes on this called purple gill. And then, you know, of course, you go to the Great Lakes, especially Erie, Detroit River, you know, Green Bay, crazy. Like one spot on a spinner blade. I'm so glad it's turning into a pitching bite out there because if you got to carry an extra life jacket for your spinner blade boxes, you know you're in trouble. You know? But I remember all those tournaments. I was there during the boring years when you just drag spinners and whoever could go like a tenth of a mile an hour faster on a tiny shoal did better. Now you just go rip their faces off and you can see them, and it's pretty cool. Uh, I still think it's fun fishing. You know, like when we were bluegill fishing, we had no electronics, and I love using electronics, but sometimes I like to unplug too, and I'll use them to find the weed edge and then go fishing. Then from that point, you're watching, you know, eruptions on the surface and flashes, and you're just seeing if you really pay attention in this area right now. The water's still pretty clear considering how murky and the winds and everything. We've had a lot of rain. Like I was saying earlier, when I put my dock in, it's 50 feet. At the end of the dock, the axle was sticking out of the water. So I couldn't even launch a boat. And the dock was, oh, it's about 3.5 feet up. Well, now the water's up to the bottom of the dock, and I've had to raise it. And so never bad to have a good amount of water, but not good for those who are flooding. I don't wish that. I just like good water, especially when you're on a chain. And around here, we have a lot of, you'd say, reservoirs. We talk about natural lakes, but they're reservoirs. They raise the water, they cut the trees off, and every now and then you still find stumps. But it's the high water creates nutrients and brings it in the lake. So this should really help all this young of the earth stuff, all these different creatures do well. And like we were talking, the fast growth rates and perch right now because of this year. I mean, we're back in. We're gonna have some real good jumbo fishing in Mille Lacs. I was there. It was only 4 years ago at a photo shoot, and they're just nuisance little tiny runs. And now they're all nice keepers, and they're super fat because the lake is full of food. Well, between Mille Lacs and here, Mille Lacs still has true trophies. It's like kind of like going to Cascade because you can get it to 2.25 pound perch on a Mille Lacs. It always was like that. They have perch contests, so you have to have 2 pounds to win. And now it's you're not quite seeing as many twos out in Cascade as years past, but it's getting a lot of pressure, you know. But it grows fast, so we got some really good perch fishing coming, and I'm super excited. We got many year classes of walleyes. When you get all this in the lake, everything's going to get hungry because they give me enough food to go around, so they're going to bite on everything.
Mm.
Let's bring a
I'm
hard winter. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Well, that is funny because I mean, we used to actually come up and fish kind of your area for a few years, and then we switched lakes that we fish at, and so I do really miss though that Northwoods, Minnesota Northwoods. I guess we're the Northwoods of Wisconsin. That's kind of crazy, but I mean, fishing in all these little locations is so different. You're talking about Mille Lacs, you're talking about FIU, and everywhere there are these just little great spots to go fishing, and so to be able to hit them all, oh, that's what I want to do. I'm just dreaming, apparently.
I love it. I fished northern Wisconsin quite a bit. In central, I had a championship way back on Wissota. I was super impressed at the size of the crappies on that lake and the panfish population, big flatheads, and the walleyes were absolutely everywhere. When I went into that, I was beginning to wonder because I kept hearing how tough it was, and there's nothing outside of the slot. and we were having 50 to 60 walleye days. And yeah, you lose a lot of lures out there, but you start seeing. I mapped it when I first got there, and before I fished, I just spent the day looking, and then the next day I marked schools of fish that I know were walleyes from staring at them on screens. Never fished them because I know I could get them somehow. Stopped on one school, pitched, got it right away. So then did really good on that one. I just missed a cut by not much. I mean, I was in 11th place or something like that, but I had a championship in Wissota was really cool. Just that border country between Wisconsin and Michigan. I could be so happy with a mailbox there, and from there, then I could go bug Safa every day and see
Yeah.
what he's up to, and go to the St. Croix factory all the time. There's a lot of great muskie waters there where you actually catch lots of muskies and visit some good old friends. John Myra, I have to go
Mhm.
there and have him put the pudding into the crappie talk here and put us on some big crappies because he catches a lot of big ones. And so there's some really cool places in Wisconsin that I love fishing in. And then of course the bay. Where do you get fish that big? I mean, monsters. I put that against Erie any day. And then the rivers, and not far from salmon. And then as you get farther, I think that kind of reminds me of like uh, maybe I'm sorry, the Norway, and then as you get to our country, we're kind of like Iceland, because because I mean, literally, everybody can have open water. Or northern Wisconsin, it keeps up, but we get cold here in the winter, and we
Yeah.
have. I had 18 inches of ice when nobody could ice fish anywhere up here.
Oh
And
yeah.
I didn't tell anybody that because then you'd have 200,000 people. But when all the stuff was happening on red, and you know why they go to red, because you're going to catch it's like a stock pond. It's so full of walleyes, it's crazy. If you're not catching walleyes, you got to put the beer down and go drill some holes,
Yeah.
because it might just be 20 feet this way and you're going to catch 100 fish. And that's why they keep having troubles up there. But big water, that's what I don't like about it, is you get those wind situations, and it's never ever ever safe. It moves, but if you get 2 feet of ice, you're a lot safer. But a Lake of the Woods, that thing locks up with so much ice, it just locks down. But they still get pressure ridges. They got
Mhm.
so many people working that road that they do a tremendous amount of work. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
glad I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Before the end of the evening, I was hoping to come back and talk ice fishing a little bit, so let's not get our brains too far from that. But we do have a question here from Terry. We were talking before about all kinds of different fishing techniques, and he's asking how you feel about pulling cranks.
Well, I cranks are great. And when I was in more tournament mode, a few years back, and I took a year off and I never went back. Maybe I should, but I would come back and I'd crank areas just to do it. Throw out a planer board on a very irregular shoreline. Learn how to do the loops back over open water and hit the steep breaks. But now you could do it now. It would work good on some of the shallow flats. If you go out after dark on any of these lakes, you're going to catch walleyes like crazy.
Mhm.
And if you have lights and you have if you can see what you're doing and you spray your boat down a little bit so you don't get ate up by bugs, you're gonna have fun because you don't have all the hatches coming out right now. And the night bite, there's like maybe on Cass or a little bit on Winnie, but Cass gets the trolling thing. Winnie doesn't, but you're gonna catch fish. And then really, really when everybody's done, like 2 in the morning, and they go back in, whatever, from that 3 o'clock to 6:30, 7 o'clock, anybody who takes the time to do it, they're going to have fun. But during the day, we're getting close to where those rock areas, pulling cranks. You better know the dive distance on that, because you're going to pull up swamp thing if it touches the bottom. You can't drag the bottom now. And so, if nothing else, if you're not sure, just put it on a planer board and only put it back 10 feet. Right by, and they're not afraid of the board. And if you start digging, go real tight. When we were in South Dakota, we're trolling through bushes and trees, and we would tickle the tops. And I was catching fish 7 feet behind the board, and my board was hitting all the time. And all of a sudden, it would just pop back, and you'd see it fighting the fish, and a lot of fun. But you could just behind the boat. You could just fish it back there using a braid. You can see that rod tip moving with braid, but don't set the hook. And what another thing I like at night, if you're using a rumble bug or a longer crankbait, you could just pull it forward and let it go back. And if they're hitting on the forward, speed up your troll rate. If they're hitting on the fallback, slow it back. But I always jig it, and you get more results if you're jigging your crankbaits and pitching crankbaits. Now I don't do that because I'm guiding, and I don't want to wear a snowmobile helmet around my clients. But I will wear a full armor suit if they start pitching crankbaits in my boat. But they do work.
Well,
But they do, yeah.
and that speaks the same to panfish too. You can do really well with some of the smaller panfish. Well, the smaller cranks for panfish. You know, some of the little rumblebees and some things like that. They don't have to be the micros. You can run like a 2-inch crank, something that goes 6 to 8 feet deep and stuff. They work well. I'm not gonna. We've run it a little bit. The problem is you have to take treble hooks out of panfish, and they don't have very big mauls. And
No.
I rather just troll around a twisty tail. And
Yeah.
see it. Some days you might get a few more bites on like a hard bait, but I'll keep the hooks out of my fingers that way by not doing it. So
That's
but no,
why
it works.
we're not pitching puppets in my boat when I'm guiding, unless I have one person. And if I have two people, I'll let one do it. But you start ripping that stuff, and it's full of treble hook, front and back hook. You do that, you're gonna get it, and you're just gonna pull it out because you're gonna go there, and they're gonna yank it out like you just did.
Yep.
And feel the pain, get it over with. Fold that skin back in there, shove the meat back in there, and put some tape on it, electrician's tape or whatever you got, duct tape, then get back to fishing. And I've had to pull it out enough. No, that's why I love jigs.
Yep.
And we still rig, but we pitch rigs and we do a lot of drop shots. So in my boat right now, I have a bunch of drop shots, different lengths, different sizes. I've got tungsten bullet sinkers with bobber stops so I can adjust. And then at the bottom, I have a bead. So if I have 6 feet of line or 10 feet of line, I have a bead at the bottom. So they can't cast my sinker off. But I got a little knot that you can slide it. Sometimes I use 2, so you can adjust it on the fly. And most of the time I throw that when I know at depth. And once you find that depth, it'll just stay that way. So sometimes it's 3 feet, sometimes it's 5. And you throw the drop shots. So I got drop shots in there. One with a float, a lot of them with different beads, different hook colors, even like the little micro. And this is a bead hook for like salmon, but it's so light. And then I like it's got nano alpha coating, which is a coating that makes it slide through the bone on a fish. Really, really nice. And I like that. That's some high tech stuff. No, am I going to use it for salmon? No, I'm not. I'm using it for walleyes. I love the bend, and I know it'll work. And that's another thing. Walleyes love big leeches. You don't have to use super big leeches or a big hook with it. And so I have pitching rigs. So we'll pitch them, but you gotta reel them because it's slimy. And then bobbers, of course. That's the bread and butter of modern day guiding right now. And we try to catch them pitching. And then pitching, I have eighths, quarters, and 16ths. And then whoever is the best caster gets the 16th. And we'll definitely, we do 50-50 bait and plastics. And we're getting close to that time where I know plastic's going to win. And then we'll use it the rest of the season until the end of September. And I'll bring bait every day because I have to go visit the local bait shops. I have to go visit Timberline, Fred's, Winnie One Stop, MD Pond, and Bait, just to say hi to everybody. I like doing that. When you go to a bait shop, don't flood the bait shop with 8 buddies or gals or guys, and then interrogate everybody in there, and then buy 1 tin of wax worms when you leave. No, don't do that, because I hear stories. And sometimes people don't even spend money. They just work them over, and that that used to happen in businesses in like New York, the gangs in New York way back when they'd go beat up people. But when you go to bait shops, spend money. Look how much gas is. Look how much it is to breathe today. Buy some minnows, talk to them a little bit, buy some worms, and if you can get leeches, if you're really nice, they probably have them somewhere in the back. And leeches are like really good right now, and crawlers are going to start taking over them plastics, depending which lake you're on. And then, of course, when you can't get leeches anymore, they're just super on fire. September into October, when the lakes turn and all that stuff comes up, I think there's a lot of leeches, a lot of bloodsuckers that come up, and the fish just key in on them. And so you just got to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, to get leeches. And it's amazing. And we know somebody.
So you were talking about drop shots. What kind of rod and reel setup, line setup? How do you set that up, like from the reel down to your?
So on the reel, I'm a braid freak, so I like a round braid, and I'm using Sunline. And I like high vis for netting purposes. If it's dark day, I love this. You can follow the line so you can get the net ready, and then I'll do a back to back uni, and I'll pull off. A lot of times I'll use 10 feet or even 15 feet of fluorocarbon, and I get real fluorocarbon because we got zebra mussels, so that's like FC leader, 8 pound. If you start going 10, I'll use 10 because it's so clear, and then tie a live bait loop knot like you would use if you're fishing in the ocean and you're tying a pompano rig. It's live bait loop knot, pull that loop through, and then I use the bottom before I tie a loop for a sinker or put a bead on there. I go in and out of the hook and bead, and I thread it on using the bottom of my leader. So I thread it on, and then I tie the sinker on. Now there's sinkers that just cinch on there, and they cast off too. So I tie them on. I put a loop, and if you go in with a loop and back over the sinker, your sinker's going to stay on. But you could push the knot back out and take it off and change sizes. And so if you can't tie that, just tie a Palomar knot and then go back through the eyelet at the end down, and just make sure that hook's pointing straight up. And I like long shank hooks, and Gamma Catso makes a long shank hook on a swivel. It is just awesome. And then you just add the leader of line later to the sinker. So you just got a hook on your hook keeper, and then you add the sinker line later, depending on how far the walleyes are up. It's that simple. So I'll have some of those in there, but they have a long shank, so I could double hook a shiner on a drop shot. And you could just use an Aberdeen. I know that, but this is so easy. And I always want to get that hook out farther. I've had many leech lips come back to the boat, and I want to feel bite and have it go in them,
Mhm.
So you get them farther in the mouth when you have a finger line.
Nice.
This is a recording.
Oh my goodness. I do really love how you took us through all that, to be honest. And kind of a little bit back, you were talking about the baits and following that through. And to be honest, that's exactly one of the last things I wanted to, kind of ask about is right now we are in the middle of summer, and it is about to be a heat wave. And so it's the perfect time to be thinking about ice season. Or so at least I think. Are you doing any kind of looking around or gathering information even now for ice? Yeah.
Yes, I am. I found some spots that I can't wait to fish. I can't wait to fish. Oh boy. And I hope I can have them for more than 1 hour or one day to myself, but I can't wait. And so when I'm looking, I'll find like little places where there's a pile of rocks and you never see anybody fishing them. A small pile of rocks, but near a basin, anything with a steep break that goes to the basin on bars or humps or structure, or deadheads. But you'll get a few of them in an area where the ice either pushed it or the wind, and they just get driven down, and you got entire logs standing up for panfish. But for walleyes, those rocks, a place where they're cruising through, and they just kind of look around and they kind of circle through that area because their structure. And it's amazing how much walleyes move. They never sit still unless there's a low pressure system, super low, and then you're on the lake when it's moderate or even high, and there's fish. All it looks like fire on your screen, and then when you get a low pressure, you swear the lake doesn't have a living thing in it. And so I like to find those spots where they're going to cruise around, and if they are going to lay down, they're going to lay down by the rocks. Uh, Steep breaks are super nice, especially on the ice if you're fishing walleyes or perch, because a walleye or perch that's at the bottom of a 25-foot break and it comes up to 12 feet or so. If you fish in the middle, a fish up here and down here, they could see your bait. So they can come up from the bottom or come down. So I call it in between fishing. So you want to be in between where they can see. And on steep breaks, it's great. If the break is gradual, they're like, I'm not going way over there to eat that morsel of food. That thing's way over there. Maybe if I swim over there tomorrow, I might eat it, And
Right.
that's what I like to think. They're not going to exert energy. So I see some steep breaks that get a little bit of rocks, got a little bit of logs, and then I found some logs for crappies and bluegills, and the weeds die off. They're like, we're sitting out here in the open, and there's a pike over there. I'm gonna go by this log. That's the first thing they're thinking. And but some lakes, they're in the weeds.
Hmm.
And what we find in northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP, there are lakes where the panfish just drop over the edge and they're deep. Find the deepest hole, and they're just swimming in waves around the lake. And that's why forward viewing is real hard on panfish, as far as that on the deep lakes. If they're in the weeds, they're a little bit safer if there's thick weeds and you're fishing and the weeds survive. But I don't know how much vegetation is going to live through algae mageddon this year. It is slimy. Holy
Yeah.
moly.
That is interesting. Do you know, does that much algae affect the weeds?
Well, so I think not so much the weeds probably, but it will affect the oxygen. And
Yes.
so so that'll be something to keep an eye on out there. Um it's interesting because so I don't know if you've mentioned the amount of weeds being more or less than you remember. You just have mentioned like excess algae, but I
Yes.
imagine there's probably more weeds than normal plus the excess algae just because.
There's more weeds because we started super low. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing weeds on lakes where they normally go to 12 feet. I'm seeing down in the 20s and just a few.
Yep.
But if you're cruising along and all of a sudden, wow, you've got a nice little patch of weeds there, you better mark it because it might live. It could be filamentous algae, which starts at the surface of the sinks. It could be something else, but you find those spots will be good later. But we have more weeds, quality weeds. A lot of really nice cabbage is dying off here. It's getting sour. I don't know if it's those few solar
Huh.
flares or what it is, but something is souring a lot of it. There are always some that lives, and the coontail's starting to come up, natural coontail, and then there's northern milfoil. The coontail is coming up, and that's kind of in some areas it's really clean, in other areas it's pretty bad.
Mhm.
So I think uh, cold temperatures nice last fall when algae just kind of stops growing, and it's always in the lake, but it stops growing. But last fall, when the water temperature went below 35, I watched the algae just get nuked and it turned into like an ink stain in the water.
Yeah.
And we just hammered walleyes in it, and everybody's gone because you pull into a spot, 27 feet of clarity. All the fish leave when the boat's 100 feet away. You can't get to them, and they just keep leaving. But when that water went below 35, what wasn't growing anymore kind of dissolved and got pulled out by the offshore winds, and that's when I was pitching deep V spinnerheads, and they're bumping it. We're using plastics, and we're also double hooking minnows on them, and kind of cool. The whole algae thing in the Midwest Outdoors, I wrote 2 articles about algae and the effects of it that's coming up this spring, and it all held true, but it's way way worse than I predicted, and it's a nightmare. And I always tell
Yeah.
people throw it in the water. Then at the end of the day, it looked like Swamp Thing. I got his hair cut in my boat, and I'm like, the water's only this far away from the side
Yeah.
of the boat. Come on. But at least it dries, and it has a purpose. I mean, it provides a home. The filamentous algae grows, and it looks like black hair coming off the bottom. the slimy green algae that covers everything. It's in the bulrushes here, and it's always fun fishing really deep bulrushes. We have some bulrushes that are 8 feet deep. That's a blast. Not you drop your lure in there and it's just fouled in. So I think whatever survives is going to be such a magnet for fish this fall. When the whitefish come in the spawning in that low 40s, we're gonna have that walleye bite. As everything turns over, there's hard. Who has time to work?
Right.
It's always a.
That's how I feel.
That is actually how I feel. Well, and then right after that is when all the expos start and the ice fishing is going, and so it gets busy quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to go check that out. Sounds fun. It's just a little farther to drive, but I don't mind. And then before ice fishing, I'll go sit in my deer stand for like 20 minutes and see if I see one of those walking by. And love grouse, rough grouse. They got the short end of the stick this year. I mean, they never do good when it rains, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. And like I seen a grouse walking in front of me with chicks. Had like two, and
Oh.
they're like this big. So like I think everything can eat them. I think even a sparrow could eat them. I mean, they're so small.
Jeez.
And I don't even know how they make it out there. It's in the wild kingdom there, but it could be a surprise.
Yep.
I hope it's good. Last year was super amazing, and so the 20 minutes I deer hunt, or 40 minutes sometimes, I take a nap up there. Looking forward to that. But ice fishing, as soon as that stuff's out of the way, if there's ice, I ain't deer hunting. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going ice fishing because love early ice. Love it.
Yep.
Yep. When we're just finally north enough that we get some of that early ice. Before, I feel like we live just south enough that we had to wait with everybody else. But I don't know. Sometimes we get lucky, and so I'm excited already. I'm already excited.
I'm looking forward to it because in my area there's deep lakes, there's medium, moderate depth lakes. There's from oligotrophic to mesotrophic lakes. Shallow, deep, big, small, and so I hit all these shallow lakes. And no, I'm not going to go get a load of big perch. Sometimes I do, but you get big greenies, big frog eaters, largemouth bass.
Yep.
You get big pike. There's areas to ice fish, and to kind of give up a little bit of my book. I don't have a book. It's just like in my mind. I always look for places that are really cool for ice fishing. If a lake is open and there's a place you could fish offshore that drops off really fast. I have spots where I could fish offshore off a dock and never step on the ice and catch fish. And sometimes they're not good, sometimes they're really good. And there's a lot, and the pike spears know these spots. I swear they're if anybody's crazy, they get out there right away. And these are places where all these whitefish have come in, so they drew all the big pike, and you just never know. I like this element of what's going to bite now. That's kind of fun. And I love bluegills,
Yeah.
crappies, bluegills, perch. They're my favorite. The phone gets dusty waiting for a call on those, but on walleyes, that's why I guide for walleyes in open water. Then in the winter, perch, and then we go for walleyes later because two-prong approach, you can't fail on both ends, can you?
Hope not.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it's fishing.
It is. That's why on ice in a boat, they have to go with me. And if I go to 3 spots that don't have fish, boy, I better be having some in the 4th spot. But in the ice, they get to stay where there's some bites going on, and then I go look. So they don't know how many times I fail. And that's the whole thing about ice guiding is you get to look. If you're fancy, you'll have other people do it for you. But I go look, and then I find fish, and then I go to move them. Sometimes they're hammering them there, so I don't have to move them. Well, I got a spot for tomorrow. In an open water, you get 3 tries. And when you look and they're sleeping, it's time to put them on some kind of fish right now. So you better know your walleye spots and their times. But in the wintertime, we do go for perch. And if the perch are tough, if you can't we'll go get some crappies and then go for walleyes, because then you get a little of both, and it's fun that way too. And all of us for the guide too, it's fun.
Yeah.
And so for this open water season, do you still have any guide days open or are you all booked up?
I do. I still have some for October, a few in September. Some of the weeks are full, and then in August, a little bit in the beginning. Pretty much July. I think I have a few at the end. So there's always some, and let me know if I can get you in, and if I can't work something out, just let me know. I could probably send you in the right direction, refer you to somebody that I work with, or even give you kind of an idea where to start. Basically.
Right.
And shorter than this show, it'd be like 3 sentences because not a good typer.
Well, and otherwise, you do a really good job of updating your social media and putting stuff out there as well. So for those of us who maybe can't make a trip with you this year, we'll
Thanks,
be
Matt.
watching that. And you have all kinds of stuff going on all the time. So whether it is open water, whether it is ice, whether it is whatever between, you have that on there. And so that's always a ton of fun to watch.
Well, now it's time for you guys to have a lot of stuff going on, and I'm going to eventually just be fishing all the time.
Yeah.
But what do? You're driving to work. I'm driving on the road. Drank my coffee and looking, and there's a moose standing in the road.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a picture of that thing, and I'm going to post it. Then I'm driving down the road, and there's 2 grouse dancing, like back and forth in front of you. I'm like, excuse me, I'm like already late. I'm 5 minutes late the way it is. And that's why I film it, and I'm like, well, I'm stuck here because I don't want to run him over, and then post it, and then so bears walking around my door, and I'm like, I'm not going out there. That one is gigantic, 400 or 500 pounder right there, and even the bear guide's like that commented like that's a giant, and I'm like, yeah. I waited till he left, and but if he would have come over, I would have.
Yeah.
Just went out of my way.
You would have said, "You want a fish fry?"
Yeah, and then so you see stuff. You see timberwolves run. You see bobcats and things that are really fast. I have not yet seen a mountain lion, and I'm like the only one up here hasn't seen one. And moving through or whatever, they don't exist. Whatever, I haven't seen one, so I haven't seen that or a Bigfoot or anything like that, which I think is one of my neighbors. And he's not Bigfoot; it's a dude, So he just looks tired all the time. But that's the thing. When you're up here, you got stuff to post, and whenever you post, you just go, "Oh, look at that!" Now you can share it.
Yeah.
Well, and we are looking forward to following along and watching all those adventures because not everybody lives in the Northwoods, but that is a whole ton of fun. And so we love that you do get to share that with us. And all the fishing stuff as well, as if that was the bonus to everything else. Like
I love it. And you guys should come up sometime and find them crappies for me so I could just show up and catch them because I know you guys are great at finding fish. And it does take talent. I mean, and you have to put in your time sometimes because you don't just like go down the right break line right away. You have to figure it out. And when I'm on the walleye hunt, sometimes it's nice to just go chase them. And the mosquitoes, if you don't have spray on around here at night, you're gonna definitely lose a pint for sure. Just walking somewhere, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
No mosquitoes in the wintertime. No wood.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's when we'll come visit.
Yeah.
Hey, but and the nice thing about northern Wisconsin, the UP, northern Minnesota, and everything up here, you ain't got no spiders that make your flesh rot when they bite you. That are cute little tiny things like called brown recluse. We don't have poisonous snakes. We don't have half the stuff you have to think about. We just got a little wood tick. When they're crawling, you got to take it off you, and then the mosquitoes. That's the level here that you got to watch. You can't use spray. You can't use spray. If you give someone spray, give it to someone you don't like. Tell them use the inside of their hands to put it on, and then have them touch their lure. They will never see a fish.
They will never catch a fish again. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, don't do that. I don't wish that on anybody.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here this evening and chatting about all this.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like we come full circle seeing that little bait again.
Yeah. This is just a great bait.
Awesome.
I'll be
Well,
hitting the
we'll
water
definitely-
soon.
Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping up with you and watching on social media, and we look forward to the next time that we can see you.
I appreciate you having me on. You guys are awesome. And we will see you soon here. And we'll definitely share and like this. So thanks everybody for watching their stuff. They're great people and they
Good.
know their stuff.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep. And thanks to everybody at home. And we're looking forward to seeing everyone on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.